Ahoy! Joe Buddy Hambone here, and I'm super psyched to announce my next Kickstarter for 321 Action, Children of Uma, a vehicle battle RPG, is launching April 19th on Kickstarter. If you're a fan of Mad Max and the Warriors, imagine that in 2060 Kansas, a post-apocalyptic version of the Dust Bowl, where there's electric cars and no shortage of ammunition. You play the Helsings, a band of wild animals roaming the wasteland reclaiming a world forgotten, and you get to do it in over 20 playable vehicles, including planes, motorcycles, dune buggies, and even monster trucks. Children of Uma will be running on Kickstarter from April 19th to May 19th, and if you back it within the first 48 hours, we've got a totally sweet Helsings patch that's going to look great on your bag or your battle vest. So be sure to check out Children of Uma from 321 Action Games and your old buddy Hambone, April 19th on Kickstarter.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. Today, he said we were going to talk about the Borderlands, and I said, Stu, I thought we did an episode on Keep on the Borderlands already. Stu Horvath.
There are sort of a lot of little winks and nods to Keep on the Borderlands in this particular product, but no, we are not talking about Keep on the Borderlands. We're just talking about Borderlands, which is a 1982 RuneQuest campaign box set. 1982, 40 years ago. Role-playing games aren't even 10 years old yet. And this box set is kind of, I don't know, fantastic. Pavis and the City box set, Big Rubble, Griffin Mountain, acknowledged classics. They have a lot going on. They're a lot more sort of exciting and more in line with what we think of today as a campaign. You know, there's epic doings in them. Whereas Borderlands is a little bit more low key, but it winds up being, I think, my favorite RuneQuest campaign from the olden days.
Really?
Yeah. I'll tell you why. There's a lot of things to love here. It gives the players a loose motivation. There's a strong setting. It gives them a sense of ownership over something. And there's no real stakes in the box. So it allows you to inject your own. Like, there's a framework of stuff that happens, but there's no like overarching plot. There's no cackling villain at the end. It's just a series of events that are strung together and create a sense of place in a way that I think is really interesting and pretty unique. Borderlands is unlike a lot of other stuff that Chaosium has done in the past. I feel like Borderlands is not often imitated, which is a shame because I think there's a lot of intriguing material here. So it's for second edition RuneQuest. Most of second edition's material, Glorantha material, was detailing Prax, which are these vast plains where there are various animal riding tribes that dominated them for, since the creation of the world. In recent years, the Lunar Empire has swept into the plains of Prax and recently conquered them, including the big city of Pavis, which is north of where Borderlands takes place. And they're in the process of sort of colonizing and civilizing this area. Right there, I think that you have like an interesting setting because the social fabric has been upset. There's a lot of uncertainty around, what the new rulers are going to be about, how the old inhabitants feel about this. And there's all these tension points because of that, just naturally, before we even really get into the box. The Lunars, I just think in general, I have a suspicion of invaders, imperialists. So they feel like they are positioned to be sort of the natural antagonists. That's sort of the case in the Pavis box set, where the imperial administrator of Pavis is kind of a jerk. This is set in a new settlement, a new lunar settlement, where this duke who's been exiled has been set up. So he's been thrown out of the greater Lunar Empire. And instead of being like executed or exiled even further, they're like, here's a crappy piece of land in the hinterland of the Empire. Go set up a settlement and leave us alone. Don't ever come back.
So we're going to take your entire kingdom from you. We're going to give you like this little patch of land so you could build a shanty town.
Exactly.
Thank you for your service.
And that kind of softens it, right? So like I'm initially like, oh, the looters, they're the invaders, they're bad, they're upsetting everybody in the area. But then you get this guy who's just like, I'm stuck here and I got a job to do. So I'm already sort of sympathetic to this guy, even though he's sort of on the bad guys side. And I just did air quotes around bad guys, because really nothing is clear that there are any bad guys sort of naturally, from the get-go. Everybody's actions make them bad guys rather than their affiliations. So basically, Duke Rouse is down there and he's got like this new settlement. He's got a fort and he's got this task of civilizing the area. So he needs help. So he hires out. And that's where you come in. The players are literally signing up for a year of service as militia members for, the Duke's peacekeeping forces.
It's funny, man. What people don't really think about in tabletop RPGs is that most times in an adventure, you are essentially a gig economy worker.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? Across the board, no matter what RPG you're playing, it's always like, hey, you got hired for this job. It's like you found the local board of the town, you went in here. It's like, well, I can do some work today, and I'm wildly unprepared and uneducated, thus, taking little tags off a board in the middle of the town to go fight a monster. And, I've been thinking about the gig economy like a lot lately, and how like, it fell on a lot of people during the pandemic to go and do these jobs in order to like make money. And like when I correlate that to the world of RPGs, I'm thinking to myself, man, there's probably a lot of people in RPGs with these very deep backstories that probably when their character was imagined or where their character came from, like they could never imagine falling on such hard times as that they'd have to go be a part of this gig economy. Yet here we are, the tried and true trope of every RPG, you're becoming a murder hobo the honest way.
Yeah, so you're right on the vibe, man. Like that's why I think this is so interesting, is because like this Borderlands kind of offers you an escape from the gig economy, RuneQuest gig economy. And I like that because it kind of like it levels the playing field, and it really kind of forces you out of this idea that fantasy characters are supposed to have this great destiny, like you're destined for greatness. No, it's Borderlands. It's a box full of job. It's great. You go out, you start it, you get a job, you get a good gig. This is an awesome job because you get room and board for a year. Most of your stuff is taken care of, and all you have to do is patrol. Hell yeah.
I mean, that's good work if you can find it.
For real. And now we get to talk about the actual contents of the box, which I think is just great. I don't understand why there aren't more boxes like this. There's a couple, but in terms of usability, I love this packaging. 1-inch box, you get a map, you get 2 booklets. One booklet is all of the stats for the adventure. Every monster, every person, stats, all you need. And then the second booklet is an overview of the area, a little bit of history, all your big picture meta stuff that you're going to kind of have to like stick in your brain to kind of make the setting come alive. It's not super important, but like you could dip into that to sort of like add detail where you need, like really tie those threads together when you need it. You get a nice map too, but the scenarios themselves are on pamphlets. And you know how I feel about pamphlets. I love a good pamphlet.
We are men who do love a good pamphlet too.
Yes. So there's 7 of them. You don't have to have the gigantic, book open, with the adventure. It's basically laid out. Some of them are a little bit more elaborate and have more pages, but they're basically just pretty thin. And because of the size constraint, they're all killer, no filler in terms of how to run them. But the thing that I really love about the adventures is that they are kind of filler.
Really?
Yeah. So the first one is like, okay, you've been hired. You're going to join the Duke's retinue and tour the region. You just go through his holdings with him and check and make sure everything is cool. Nothing happens. You're prepared for something to happen. There's rumors of raiders, but like nothing happens. So you just basically go from point to point to settlement and find out like what's going on. You get introduced to, the important people and like you see the sights. It's a great intro, right?
I think so. And in a lot of ways, talking about how like, you stepped out of the gig economy, you've gotten like an actual job. It really does tie itself together with the mundaneness of your day job,
Yeah. And it allows because there's no like action, there's no big event. It allows the players to kind of like own it a little bit more and get into their roles and find out what they like about this place and kind of introduce themselves to the boss man. It's a super novel setup, I think. Especially, like, I think it's a super novel setup now. In 1982, less than a decade in, it seems so out of left field for what people are expecting. Remember, most material right now, adventure material, is literally like maybe a town, always a dungeon, hole in the ground.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, we're not that far removed from the actual keep on the Borderland, which was mostly action. I mean, it was 79 for that. This is 82. We're 3 years away. The medium has not grown that much.
Yeah, it just hasn't had a chance. But there's just really good design brains in the early 80s at Chaosium. And then the other 6 adventures are sort of a mix of like activities that happen over the course of your term of service. There's a hunt for outlaws. The Duke's daughter gets kidnapped at one point, so you have to go deal with those dudes that did that, which is a pretty cool tower. They have like a tower stronghold.
I love a good tower stronghold.
Yeah. His wife gets sick and they suspect that it's a magical plague, so you have to kind of find the source of the plague. There's a temple of evil. I don't want to say evil. There's a temple of newtlings that's sort of causing trouble that you have to like root out. And then there's you have to get an egg from a giant condor.
That's fun.
So there's these like big crags. So you have to find out a way to like get up there and get the egg. And then once you have the egg, you go way north into what is essentially, it sort of connects to Griffin Mountain, a different campaign. You go way north into Griffin Mountain to trade the egg with a giant for an important magic item. And then at that point, like those are the events. That's it.
Right. But in fairness, this is RuneQuest. So even the most like over the plate, we're just going to go and like have a word with these bandits, can get the entire party killed very easily because there is not a lot of safety net in RuneQuest.
True. And that is one of the other cool things that I like about Borderlands, because it's a new settlement. It's basically just a fort at the beginning. They don't have a lot of stuff. They don't have a lot of amenities, let's say. So yeah, like they say, it ain't a game unless somebody loses a limb. That's true. And you probably could lose a limb. And it's not that big a deal in RuneQuest because there's magic that you could use to get that limb reattached. The problem with Borderlands is there's no healer in the fort. So you have to go all the way, travel like across the plains to Horngate, where there's a shrine of Chalana Arroy, the goddess of healing, if your dudes get banged up. So it's like there's emergent storytelling, right? So like you do the outlaw hunt, you get messed up, Bob's bleeding out. Okay, well, we got to get on the horses and go, cross country to the Horngate. Hope nothing happens. Hope you can hold on, Bob. And like the adventure just kind of builds out of that and your interests. You have a lot of downtime. So like you're going to have other people who asking you to do stuff. You could maybe take a trip, trade concerns up to Pavis. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that can be done, but they're just not adventures formally laid out. I just think that it's a really unique way to kind of put players in a situation where things aren't quite what they expect, and they have a lot of options to do a lot of different types of things. And then at the end, when your term of service is over, technically you could just kind of leave. But I think if you get through all of this, you're going to feel like you found a home.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
I love it. I mean, it's cool in a way where anytime you watch any of those old frontier Western movies, this is the town, but the town is kind of walled off, and the town is kind of like, we constantly need people to protect us because even though we really have nothing, there are other people out there who have less and want our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like with the whole thing with like, there's no healer. It's like, yeah, I mean, you'd have to go and ride like a day to get medicine or come see the local doctor. Does he have any medical experience? No, but he's the least queasy person in town. Hopefully he can sew. He gets to be the doctor, So it's like, it's kind of a cool experience. And it's kind of something that I think, with a modern fantasy audience, like we take for granted, being able to like, well, I was like looking in this bar and they had absinthe, they had gin, and look, it's a healing potion out of nowhere. We always talk about RuneQuest being dangerous, but when it's you working an outpost, seemingly in the middle of nowhere, and essentially in exile from the rest of the kingdom, that's that's pretty tough, man. That's hard times.
Yeah. And on top of everything, there's a really defined sort of political and social tension between you as sort of, agents of the colonizer and the native population. So like there's people there who, some of whom are happy that you're bringing law and order to the land. Some of them are not, understandably, on both sides of the coin. So it creates a lot of interesting things to navigate, potentially, depending on how your game runs and how you develop the fort, because you are very much as much as you're just the hired hands, you are also sort of guiding the fort to its growth as a presence in the world.
Okay, so that's pretty heavy, because you're describing it now, and the way I'm envisioning it is the colonizer from the castle gets exiled to go live amongst the people whom he colonized.
Kind of, yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's got layers for 1982.
Yeah. And again, I'm coming at it from a certain point of view, so I draw those layers out, but it really is baked in to the text. And they were from out west. Chaosy was based in San Francisco, so that old west kind of vibe is, I think, just a natural fit if you're living out there. And I mean, it's also like, you really nailed it. It really does have like an old west, like, cowboy movie feel. And those movies are always about some kind of colonization, even if they don't realize it.
It's cool, man. It's definitely interesting. And like when you make that San Francisco connection, like a lot of old western, like new world vibe is really baked into everything that goes, like, I would say south of, like, go west of Missouri. Mm-hmm. Very different, like the San Francisco Gold Rush and all the stuff that we like learned about as kids, like where like this is what the world was like, Texas Rangers, all this other stuff. Like, very cool. Like this one is like got layers to it. I think at the start of the episode, I'm like, is this going to be another like Snake Pipe Hollow, which is essentially like Keep on the Borderlands, but like the other version of it? But this is something very different, and an experience that I was not aware I'd be having with this.
Yeah, recently on Twitter, somebody was asking for, I can't remember off the top of my head who it was. Indie Designer was just being like, what's your favorite campaign? And I was just like, Borderlands, RuneQuest Borderlands. It's so good. Nobody knows about this one. Go check it out. And I kind of do that periodically. It's such a weird dead end, because if you look at the reviews at the time, people were like kind of blown away by this thing. They were just like, holy crap, this sets like a new bar for campaigns and like what you package in it and how you approach it. And it's just like, this is some top shelf stuff. And then no one ripped it off, because I think it's hard. I think that there's sort of a little bit of lightning in a bottle where you have like a bunch of really interesting people with an interesting world that just happens to have just enough grit built into it to be interesting and hold your attention, while also allowing you a lot of fictional leeway for your own storytelling. Like, all those things kind of intersected perfectly at this one moment in time, and you got this really good thing. And I think that's partly why you just don't see it get imitated that much. But I think there are some things that sort of scratch at it, but no real good clone of this approach. And that's a bummer. But I'm throwing out a gauntlet, indie designers who listen to this podcast. Now you got a sweet box set that you can go find and totally rip off. And I want you to do it and send me the results, because more Borderlands stuff is good, because it really recontextualizes the role-playing experience, I think.
And dear listener, if you go looking for it on the Google machine, make sure that you put in RuneQuest Borderlands TTRPG, because the video games, the SEO on this is going to be terrible.
Oh yeah, terrible.
Stu, do you have any final thoughts on Borderlands?
I do. This is a really cool fun fact that I don't remember who told me. It might have been Joe DeSimone, but if it was you, Joe, hats off to you, because this is a good one. So Borderlands is essentially a campaign box set about getting a job, right?
Yep.
So weird thing. One of the people credited on the box front, there's like a million names on the box. Boyle, Chodak, Fiordo, Free, Harmon, Hoffman, Kirby, Kraft, Crank, Perrin, Peterson, Stafford, Willis, Wolcott. Perrin, Peterson, Stafford, Willis, those are like your Chaosium rock stars, right? Steve Perrin, Lynn Willis, Greg Stafford, Sandy Peterson. The rest of the folks, Charlie Crank is one of them. Lisa A. Free, an artist, and a lot of people who just have vanished in time. But one of them, Reed Hoffman, was 14 years old.
What?
When he wrote for this. And the reason we know who he is because he went on to be one of the founders of PayPal and a co-founder of LinkedIn.
Jesus.
Like got millions of dollars now.
Well, look at Chaosium breaking some labor laws back in the day.
I love it though, because he goes on to have like a job related job. And he like the first time he gets his name in print is a role-playing game about getting a job. It's great.
It's like some Babe Ruth like pointing out to the bleacher shit right there. I'm going to be richer than God.
Yeah, Reed, if you're listening, we take donations.
Yeah. Join our Patreon.
It's not tax deductible because we're not a nonprofit, but we'll take your money if you want to throw us some.
As much as you'd like to give us. So this was another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can the people find you?
Oh, man, they can find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG. I've already posted about Borderlands and most of the 2E RuneQuest stuff, but there's always new stuff. And you can always dig back. That stuff's still there. Go back.
Very cool. You can find me on the Twitter, Instagram, and on the TikTok at John McGuire RPG. I'm posting more because I have things to promote. Children of Uma, the latest Kickstarter from 321 Action Games, has just 4 days left on Kickstarter. It's fully funded. We are racing towards some stretch goals. It is pretty cool. If you like the idea of a vehicle battle RPG, if you love the idea that Mad Max meets the Warriors in 2060 Kansas with electric cars and no shortage of ammunition, this is the game for you. So check it out anywhere I am on social media at John McGuire RPG. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And if you like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/vintagerpg. We've got a behind-the-scenes look at my game. We've got a killer Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of. We got some other stuff brewing that we know you're going to love. And we've got a behind-the-scenes look at Stu's book, no longer tentatively titled Experience Points. Check out the Patreon to find out more, including a title reveal. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dego West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.